On a quiet Tuesday morning, Alicia Thompson drove her silver sedan through the tree-lined streets of Willowbrook, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city. At 35, she carried herself with the kind of calm confidence that came from years of specialized training. Her dark suit was perfectly tailored, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes constantly scanned the streets through designer sunglasses. To anyone watching, she looked like just another successful professional heading to work. What nobody could tell was that Alicia was an undercover CIA operative on one of the most critical missions of her career. For weeks, she'd been tracking a dangerous group suspected of planning something big in this seemingly peaceful neighborhood. Every detail of her appearance, every move she made, was carefully calculated to blend in while gathering crucial information. As she turned onto Maple Avenue, she noticed a police car in her rearview mirror. 2 officers sat inside, and they seemed to be following her. Alicia maintained her speed, signaling properly at every turn, doing everything by the book. She'd been trained to handle situations like this, to stay calm no matter what. The police car's lights suddenly flashed, and the siren gave a short whoop. Alicia's training kicked in immediately. She signaled, pulled over to the curb, and placed both hands visible on the steering wheel. Through her side mirror, she watched as Officers Miller and Jenkins approached her car. Miller was older, probably in his 50s, with a stern face and narrowed eyes. Jenkins was younger, maybe early 30s, but carried the same suspicious expression. License and registration, Miller demanded, not bothering with any greeting. His tone was sharp, unfriendly. Alicia reached slowly for her documents, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Good morning, officers. Is there a problem? What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Jenkins asked, leaning down to peer into her car. His question carried an edge that made it clear he didn't think she belonged there. "I'm heading to a business meeting," Alicia replied calmly, handing over her carefully crafted fake ID and registration. Everything about her cover identity was perfect, down to the smallest detail. Miller studied the documents with exaggerated slowness. "Business meeting, huh? At 8 in the morning? In Willowbrook?" The way he said it made it sound like he didn't believe her. Alicia had encountered this kind of behavior before, both in her personal life and during her missions. She knew exactly what was happening, but her training required her to maintain her cover at all costs. "Yes, sir, I'm a financial consultant. My client lives in the area," she explained, keeping her voice steady and professional. Jenkins walked around her car, examining it closely as if looking for something suspicious. "Fancy car for a consultant," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "I've worked hard to get where I am," Alicia responded, maintaining her composure despite the growing tension. Miller handed back her documents but didn't step away from the car. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." "May I ask why?" Alicia questioned, knowing she had every right to ask, but also knowing it might escalate the situation. "Just step out of the car," Miller repeated, his hand moving closer to his belt where his equipment was stationed. Alicia took a deep breath, reminding herself of her mission's importance. She couldn't blow her cover, not when she was so close to gathering the evidence she needed. Slowly, she opened the door and stepped out, standing tall but keeping her hands visible. The morning sun was bright now, and a few early risers had started to notice the police stop. A woman walking her dog slowed down to watch. A man getting his newspaper lingered on his porch. Alicia was aware of every witness, every potential complication to her mission. "Turn around, hands on the car," Jenkins ordered, his voice carrying across the quiet street. As Alicia complied, she felt the weight of her concealed communication device against her ankle. One press of a button would alert her team, but using it too soon could compromise everything she'd worked for. She had to play this smart, had to maintain her cover while dealing with what was becoming an increasingly difficult situation. Alicia placed her hands on the hood of her car, feeling the cool metal beneath her palms. The situation was escalating quickly, and she could sense the officers' hostility growing with each passing moment. More neighbors had started to gather, some pretending to check their mail, others openly watching from their driveways. "Spread your legs," Officer Jenkins commanded, his voice unnecessarily loud in the quiet morning air. As Alicia complied, she heard Miller speaking into his radio, calling for backup. For a simple traffic stop. This was getting out of hand. She knew she had to be careful with her next words. "Officers, I've been completely cooperative. Can you please tell me what this is about?" she asked, keeping her voice calm and respectful. "We'll ask the questions here," Miller snapped back. "You got any weapons in the car?" "No, sir. I don't own any weapons," Alicia replied truthfully. Her CIA-issued equipment was so well hidden that even a thorough search wouldn't reveal it. Jenkins began patting her down, his search more aggressive than necessary. Alicia remained still, counting the seconds in her head, weighing her options. Her mission was too important to compromise, but this situation was becoming dangerous. "Why are you really in this neighborhood?" Miller pressed, circling around to face her. "We've had reports of suspicious activity." Alicia knew this was a lie. She'd been monitoring all police communications in the area, and there had been no such reports. They had stopped her for one reason only, and it had nothing to do with suspicious activity. "As I said, I have a business meeting," she repeated, maintaining her cover story. A third police car pulled up, and 2 more officers emerged. The situation was drawing even more attention now. A teenager across the street had started recording with his phone. An elderly couple stood on their porch, shaking their heads in disapproval. "Check the car," Miller ordered the newly arrived officers. "Every inch of it." Alicia's mind raced. Her car was clean of anything that could compromise her identity, but this was taking valuable time away from her surveillance operation. The terrorist cell she was tracking could be making their move right now, and she was stuck here, being harassed by officers who couldn't see past her skin color. "I don't consent to a search," Alicia stated firmly but politely. "You haven't given me any reason for this stop." Miller's face reddened. "You're being uncooperative. That's reason enough." The backup officers began searching her car anyway, pulling out her briefcase, looking under seats, checking the trunk. Alicia watched as they handled her carefully arranged surveillance equipment disguised as ordinary business items. A laptop that looked normal but contained encrypted CIA software. A phone that could intercept communications within a mile radius. All of it appearing completely innocent to the untrained eye. "Found something," one of the backup officers called out, holding up a black device. Alicia's heart skipped a beat, but she maintained her composure as the officer examined what was actually just a portable phone charger. "That's my power bank," she explained. "For my phone." Jenkins grabbed her purse from the car and started rifling through it. "Lot of expensive stuff for a consultant," he muttered, pulling out her designer wallet. "Is success a crime now?" Alicia asked, unable to keep a hint of frustration from her voice. Miller stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "Watch your tone." The crowd of onlookers had grown larger. Alicia could hear murmurs of disapproval, people questioning why 4 officers were needed for one woman who had done nothing wrong. She could feel the tension in the air, the community's unease with what they were witnessing. "Put your hands behind your back," Miller suddenly ordered. "What? Why?" Alicia asked, genuinely surprised. They had found nothing, she had broken no laws, yet they were escalating further. "Hands behind your back." "Now," Miller shouted, reaching for his handcuffs. Alicia's training screamed at her to resist, to fight back, to use any of the dozen ways she knew to disable these officers. But she couldn't, not without blowing her cover. Not without ruining months of careful work that could save countless lives. As the cold metal clicked around her wrists, Alicia made a decision. With her heel, she pressed a tiny button in her shoe, sending an emergency signal to her team. She had held out as long as she could, but now she needed backup. Her mission was about to take an unexpected turn, and these officers had no idea what they had just set in motion. The handcuffs felt tight around Alicia's wrists as Officer Miller pushed her toward his patrol car. The metal bit into her skin, but she remained silent, her face a mask of calm despite the anger burning inside her. The crowd of neighbors had grown to about 20 people now, many recording the scene on their phones. "This is wrong." An elderly woman called out from her porch. "She hasn't done anything." "Ma'am, please stay back," Jenkins warned, holding up his hand to the growing crowd. "This is police business." Alicia could hear people murmuring, their voices a mix of concern and outrage. A young mother with a stroller had stopped to watch, her face creased with worry. A man in a business suit was on his phone, apparently calling someone about what he was witnessing. As Miller opened the patrol car's back door, Alicia noticed a black SUV turning onto the street. Her trained eye immediately recognized it as one of her agency's vehicles. Help was coming, but she needed to buy a little more time without arousing suspicion. "Officers, I want to be very clear," Alicia said, her voice steady and loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I have not resisted. I have been completely cooperative. I request that you state clearly why I am being detained." Miller hesitated, aware of all the phones recording them. "You're being detained for suspicious behavior and failure to comply with police instructions." "What suspicious behavior?" a man from the crowd shouted. "She was just driving." The black SUV pulled up behind the police cars, and 3 people in dark suits stepped out. Alicia recognized her supervisor, Director Johnson, along with 2 FBI agents. They moved with purpose, their badges already in hand. "Officers, FBI," Director Johnson announced, his voice carrying authority that made everyone pause. "Release that woman immediately." Miller and Jenkins exchanged confused looks. "Sir, this is a local police matter," Miller started to say. Director Johnson held up his credentials. "That woman is a federal agent in the middle of a critical operation. You've just compromised months of surveillance work." The color drained from Miller's face. Jenkins took a step back, his hand shaking slightly. The other 2 officers looked at each other in shock. "There must be some mistake," Miller stammered. "We were just—" "There's no mistake," Director Johnson cut him off. "Agent Thompson has been tracking a terrorist cell operating in this neighborhood. A cell that was planning an attack on a local school." Gasps rose from the crowd. Parents clutched their children closer. The elderly woman who had spoken up earlier covered her mouth in shock. "Unlock those handcuffs now," Director Johnson ordered. Miller fumbled with his keys, his hands trembling as he removed the handcuffs from Alicia's wrists. She rubbed her wrists calmly, maintaining her professional composure even as red marks showed where the metal had pressed too tight. We didn't know," Jenkins said weakly. "She didn't identify herself as—" "She couldn't," Director Johnson interrupted. "She was undercover. That's the whole point." He turned to address the crowd. "What you've witnessed here today is exactly why proper procedures matter. These officers made assumptions based on appearance rather than facts. The FBI agents were already on their phones, coordinating damage control. The terrorist cell would know something was wrong now. They'd have to move fast to salvage what they could of the operation. Your chief will be hearing from us," Director Johnson continued, "and I expect a full investigation into this incident." Alicia finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "The terrorist cell was using the old warehouse on Pine Street. They have explosives. We need to move now." Director Johnson nodded and signaled to his team. Within seconds, they were coordinating with local SWAT teams and bomb squads. The quiet suburban street transformed into a hive of activity as emergency vehicles began arriving. Miller and Jenkins stood frozen, watching their career prospects crumble before their eyes. The crowd's phones were still recording, capturing every moment of their humiliation. "You two with me," their supervisor's voice crackled over the radio. "Downtown. Now." As the officers drove away, Alicia turned to the crowd. "Thank you all for your concern," she said. "Your willingness to speak up may have just helped save lives." The neighbors began dispersing, talking among themselves about what they'd witnessed. Many were already sharing their videos online. By evening, the story would be national news, but Alicia had more important things to worry about. She had terrorists to catch, and thanks to these officers, she now had to do it much faster than planned. The revelation sent shockwaves through the quiet neighborhood. Director Johnson quickly took control of the situation, his commanding presence bringing order to the chaos. He turned to Alicia, speaking in a low voice that only she could hear. "Status report, Agent Thompson. How compromised is the operation?" Alicia's mind worked quickly, analyzing every angle. "The cell members don't know my face yet. I've been monitoring from a distance, but they'll hear about this incident soon. We have maybe 2 hours before they scatter." More federal vehicles arrived, transforming the suburban street into a tactical command center. FBI agents set up communication equipment while SWAT teams gathered for briefing. The contrast between the peaceful neighborhood and the sudden military-like presence was striking. Director Johnson addressed the growing team. "Listen up. We have a terrorist cell operating from the warehouse on Pine Street. They're planning an attack on Willowbrook Elementary. Agent Thompson has been tracking them for months. Thanks to this incident, he gestured toward the departing police cars. We're now on a very tight timeline. Alicia pulled out her concealed tablet, bringing up surveillance photos and building layouts. 5 suspects. They've been receiving shipments of chemicals. 2 arrived just yesterday. They're building explosives. The gathered agents leaned in, studying the information. Some of the neighbors still lingered, watching from a distance as the federal operation unfolded before their eyes. The school, a local SWAT commander said, his face pale. "My daughter goes there. Which is why we move now," Director Johnson responded. "Agent Thompson, take point on this. It's your operation." Alicia nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. She addressed the team, her voice steady and authoritative. "The warehouse has 3 entrances. They've got cameras on the front and back, but there's a blind spot on the east side. They change shifts at noon. That's our window." As the team prepared to move out, Alicia noticed Officers Miller and Jenkins being escorted to a federal vehicle. Their supervisor was with them, his face grim. The 2 officers looked shell-shocked, finally understanding the magnitude of their mistake. "Agent Thompson," Miller called out as he was led past her. We didn't know. I'm sorry." Alicia met his gaze. "Your assumptions could have cost children their lives. Think about that." The words hit home. Jenkins looked like he might be sick. Their supervisor shook his head in disgust as they were driven away. Within 30 minutes, the operation was in motion. Alicia rode in the lead vehicle, her mind focused on the task ahead. The streets of Willowbrook passed by in a blur as they headed toward the warehouse district. "All units, this is Thompson," she spoke into her radio. "Remember, these suspects are highly dangerous. They have explosives and they're desperate. No heroics. We do this by the book." The warehouse came into view, a run-down building that looked abandoned from the outside. But Alicia knew better. She'd spent weeks documenting every movement, every delivery, every person who entered or left. "Snipers in position," came a voice over the radio. "SWAT teams ready," another reported. "Bomb squad standing by." Alicia checked her watch. 11:55 a.m. 5 minutes until the shift change. She gave the signal, and the teams moved into position with practiced precision. At exactly noon, just as Alicia had predicted, 2 men exited the warehouse while 2 others approached to take their place. It was the perfect moment of vulnerability. "Go, go, go," Alicia commanded. The operation unfolded with lightning speed. SWAT teams breached from multiple angles. Flashbangs exploded. Shouts of federal agents echoed through the warehouse. In less than 3 minutes, all 5 suspects were in custody. But the real shock came when the bomb squad entered. The terrorists had been further along than anyone realized. Components for multiple devices were laid out on tables. Maps of Willowbrook Elementary covered the walls. A calendar had next week's parent-teacher conference circled in red. "Jesus," the bomb squad leader whispered. They were days away from being ready. Alicia felt a chill run down her spine. If those officers hadn't delayed her this morning, if she'd maintained her surveillance schedule, she would have discovered this in time. Their prejudice, their assumptions, had inadvertently forced the operation to move faster than planned. As the suspects were led away in handcuffs, news vans began arriving. The story was already spreading. A routine traffic stop had exposed racial profiling by police officers, which had accidentally uncovered a terrorist plot against a school. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Director Johnson approached Alicia. "Outstanding work, Agent Thompson, despite the complications." She nodded, watching as evidence was catalogued and removed. "Sometimes good comes from bad situations, sir. But it shouldn't have happened this way." The aftermath of the operation exploded across the city like wildfire. By evening, news channels were running continuous coverage of what they called the Willowbrook incident. Videos from the morning traffic stop had gone viral, shared millions of times across social media platforms. The contrast between the harassment of a federal agent and the terrorist plot she was investigating became the center of national debate. Alicia sat in the FBI field office, giving her official statement for the 3rd time that day. Internal affairs investigators from both the police department and federal agencies were conducting separate inquiries. The room was filled with senior officials, all wanting to understand how a routine surveillance operation had nearly been derailed by racial profiling. Agent Thompson, the internal affairs captain, asked, "Did you at any point feel your life was in danger during the traffic stop?" Alicia chose her words carefully. "I felt the situation was escalating unnecessarily. My primary concern was maintaining my cover to protect the larger operation." Meanwhile, across town at police headquarters, Officers Miller and Jenkins faced their own interrogation. The police chief himself was present, his face a mask of barely contained anger. "Do you realize what you've done?" the chief demanded. "You didn't just harass a federal agent. You compromised a terrorism investigation. Children could have died." Miller sat slumped in his chair, all his earlier bravado gone. "Chief, we thought we were doing our job. She looked suspicious in that neighborhood." "Suspicious how?" the chief pressed. "Because she was black? Driving a nice car? Wearing professional clothes?" Jenkins tried to defend their actions. "We've had break-ins in that area. We were just being vigilant." The chief slammed his hand on the table. "No, you were being prejudiced. And now the whole country knows it." The investigation revealed troubling patterns. Body camera footage showed that Miller and Jenkins had stopped 17 drivers in Willowbrook over the past month. 15 were people of color. None had committed any crimes. By the next morning, protesters gathered outside the police station. Parents from Willowbrook Elementary held signs thanking Agent Thompson while demanding accountability for the officers. The crowd grew throughout the day, peaceful but determined. Inside City Hall, emergency meetings were being held. The mayor faced mounting pressure to take decisive action. Community leaders demanded immediate reforms. "This isn't just about 2 officers," a civil rights attorney addressed the city council. "This is about systemic problems in how we police our communities." The police union initially tried to defend Miller and Jenkins, but as more evidence emerged, even they couldn't justify the officers' actions. The union president released a statement acknowledging serious lapses in judgment and supporting additional training. 3 days after the incident, the chief announced his decision. Officers Miller and Jenkins were terminated, effective immediately. The department would undergo mandatory bias training, and new policies would be implemented for traffic stops. But the story didn't end there. The viral videos had sparked a nationwide conversation. Other cities began reviewing their own police procedures. Congress called for hearings on racial profiling in law enforcement. Alicia found herself at the center of it all. She appeared before congressional committees, sharing her experience and offering recommendations for reform. Her testimony was powerful and measured, focusing on solutions rather than anger. "What happened to me happens to countless others every day," she told the committee. "The difference is I had the protection of my badge. Most people don't." The 5 terrorists arrested in the warehouse operation were charged with conspiracy to commit terrorism. During interrogation, they revealed plans to detonate explosives during the crowded parent-teacher conference, which would have resulted in catastrophic casualties. Parents from Willowbrook Elementary organized a ceremony to honor Alicia. Hundreds attended, including many who had witnessed the traffic stop. The elderly woman who had first spoken up that morning presented Alicia with a Community Hero Award. "You saved our children," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "And you showed us why we must speak up against injustice." The department implemented new policies. All traffic stops required specific probable cause, body cameras were mandatory, and a civilian oversight board was established. Other cities followed suit, creating what became known as Thompson Protocols for police interactions. Miller and Jenkins faced civil rights charges. During their trial, videos from that morning played repeatedly, showing their bias in stark detail. They were convicted and sentenced to probation and community service, required to speak at police academies about the dangers of prejudice in law enforcement. Months later, Alicia received a letter from Jenkins. He wrote about attending counseling, confronting his biases, and working with community organizations. "I'm learning," he wrote. "I'm sorry it took almost ruining your operation and endangering children for me to see what I was doing." The Willowbrook incident became a case study in police academies nationwide, a powerful reminder that prejudice has no place in law enforcement and that assumptions based on race can have deadly consequences. In the weeks following the incident, Alicia faced an unexpected challenge. Her cover was blown, and the CIA needed to reassign her. But Director Johnson had a different idea. "Thompson, we want you to stay visible," he said during a private meeting. "Turn this situation to our advantage." Alicia raised an eyebrow. "How exactly?" "Become what everyone already thinks you are, a civil rights advocate. Use the attention to get close to groups we've been trying to infiltrate for years." The plan was brilliant. The viral videos had made Alicia a symbol of resistance against injustice. Community organizations, activist groups, and even some underground networks were reaching out, wanting her to speak at their events. "Some of these groups have connections to our targets," Director Johnson explained, sliding a folder across his desk. "Groups that support various causes, including some that fund terrorist organizations without knowing it." Alicia studied the files. Several charitable organizations were unknowingly funneling money to extremist groups overseas. The terrorists she'd caught in Willowbrook had received funding through one such organization. "You want me to trace the money?" She understood immediately. "Exactly. And who better than the woman who stood up to police harassment while saving a school?" Within days, Alicia began accepting speaking engagements. She talked about her experience, about systemic racism, about the need for change. Her speeches were powerful and genuine because everything she said was true. She had experienced discrimination both as a regular citizen and as an agent. At a conference in Chicago, she met representatives from a humanitarian aid organization. They seemed legitimate on the surface, running food banks and homeless shelters. But Alicia's trained eye caught subtle signs, coded language in their pamphlets, certain symbols on their website. "We'd love your support," the organization's director told her. "Someone with your profile could really help our cause." Alicia smiled. "I'd be honored to help. Tell me more about your international programs." Over the next month, she embedded herself deeper into various organizations. Most were genuine, doing good work. But 3 had suspicious connections. Money was being transferred overseas through complex networks, eventually reaching known terrorist funding channels. The breakthrough came at a fundraising gala in New York. Alicia was the keynote speaker, sharing her story with hundreds of wealthy donors. During the networking session, she overheard a conversation between 2 men. "The Willowbrook cell was careless," one whispered. "But their funding structure was solid. We need to replicate it." Alicia maintained her composure, pretending to admire a painting while recording everything with her concealed device. The men discussed moving money through art auctions and charity events, a sophisticated laundering operation. Later that night, she transmitted the recording to headquarters. The CIA's Financial Crimes Unit identified one of the men as a known facilitator for international terrorist networks. "We've been trying to track him for years," her handler reported. "He's always stayed in the shadows, but now he's approaching you." Sure enough, the next day, Alicia received an invitation to a private meeting. The man introduced himself as a philanthropist interested in supporting her advocacy work. "I was moved by your speech," he said smoothly. "I want to donate significantly to your cause. Perhaps we could discuss setting up a foundation." Alicia played along, knowing this was exactly what they needed. Over several meetings, she learned about his network, how they moved money, who their contacts were, which banks they used. The terrorist cell unknowingly revealed more of their operation because they saw her as a hero figure who could help their cause. They believed she was angry at the system, ready to support radical change. 6 months after the Willowbrook incident, the CIA launched coordinated raids across 5 countries. They dismantled a funding network that had supported terrorist operations for over a decade. Millions in assets were frozen. Dozens of facilitators were arrested. At a press conference announcing the operation's success, the Attorney General credited exceptional intelligence work, but couldn't reveal Alicia's role. The public still saw her as a civil rights icon, unaware that she had used that image to infiltrate and destroy a terrorist funding network. In her office, Alicia looked at 2 photographs on her wall. One showed her receiving the Community Hero Award from Willowbrook Elementary. The other was her CIA commendation, which would remain classified for decades. Sometimes, she reflected, the worst moments can lead to the greatest opportunities. The prejudice she faced that morning had nearly ruined one operation, but ultimately led to dismantling a much larger threat. She picked up her phone as it buzzed with another speaking invitation. The work continued. There were more networks to uncover, more threats to neutralize. And now she had the perfect cover, the woman who stood up to injustice while secretly fighting the enemies of peace. A year after the Willowbrook incident, Alicia stood before a graduating class at the FBI Academy. She had been invited to give the commencement speech, a full-circle moment that felt surreal. The auditorium was packed with fresh faces, eager agents ready to begin their careers. "Every challenge can become an opportunity," she began, her voice strong and clear. "A year ago, I was handcuffed on a suburban street because 2 officers made assumptions based on my appearance. Today, I'm here to tell you that moment changed everything, not just for me, but for law enforcement across our nation." In the audience, she spotted former Officer Jenkins. He had written to her months ago, asking if he could attend. After completing his sentence, he dedicated himself to teaching about bias in policing. His presence here was part of his journey toward redemption. "The Willowbrook incident exposed flaws in our system," Alicia continued. "But it also showed us the power of community, the importance of accountability, and how one moment can spark nationwide change." She shared how the incident had led to the dismantling of not 1, but 3 terrorist networks. How the public attention had allowed her to infiltrate funding operations that had eluded authorities for years. How sometimes being forced into the spotlight can illuminate the darkest corners. After her speech, Jenkins approached her. He looked different now, humbled, thoughtful. "Agent Thompson," he said, "I wanted to thank you. Not for forgiving me. I know I don't deserve that, but for turning something terrible into something meaningful." Alicia nodded. "We all have choices, Jenkins. You chose to learn from your mistakes. That matters." The reforms sparked by the incident had spread nationwide. Police departments adopted stricter protocols. Civilian oversight boards became standard. Body cameras were now mandatory in most jurisdictions. The Thompson protocols were taught in every police academy. But perhaps the biggest change was in Willowbrook itself. The community had transformed. Neighborhood Watch programs now included diversity training. The elementary school created a curriculum about civil rights and community heroes. Parents who had once been silent about injustice now spoke up. That evening, Alicia attended a ceremony at Willowbrook Elementary. The school was dedicating its new library in her honor. Children performed a play about standing up for what's right, based on her story. The elderly woman who had first spoken up that morning was there. "You know," she told Alicia, "I used to mind my own business. That day changed me too. Now I speak up when I see something wrong." Director Johnson found Alicia after the ceremony. "Ready for your next assignment?" he asked with a smile. She was being promoted to lead a new division focused on domestic terrorism and civil rights. It would combine her expertise in undercover operations with her newfound role as a public figure. "We need someone who understands both worlds," Johnson explained. "Someone who can navigate the complexities of community relations while conducting high-level intelligence operations." Alicia accepted. Her new role would allow her to continue both missions, protecting national security and advocating for justice. 6 months later, she implemented a revolutionary program. Federal agents would undergo community immersion training, living and working in diverse neighborhoods to understand the people they served. Former officers like Jenkins became instructors, sharing their experiences and lessons learned. The program was so successful it expanded nationally. Crime rates dropped in participating cities. Community trust in law enforcement improved. Tips about potential threats increased as people felt safer approaching authorities. On the 5th anniversary of the Willowbrook incident, a documentary aired nationwide. It showed how one moment of injustice had catalyzed sweeping changes. Former officers Miller and Jenkins both participated, offering their perspectives on how their actions that day had consequences far beyond what they'd imagined. Miller, now working with at-risk youth, admitted, "I let my prejudices cloud my judgment. I nearly allowed terrorists to harm children because I was focused on the wrong threat." The documentary ended with Alicia reflecting on the journey. "Sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead to the greatest changes," she said. "What matters is how we respond, how we grow, and how we use our experiences to make things better." As she watched the documentary with her team, Alicia felt a sense of completion. The Willowbrook incident had been a turning point, not just for her career, but for the nation's approach to law enforcement and community relations. Her phone buzzed with a new assignment. Another threat, another challenge. But now she faced them with the knowledge that even the darkest moments could be transformed into catalysts for positive change. The woman who had been handcuffed on a quiet suburban street had become a symbol of resilience, justice, and the power of turning adversity into opportunity. And her story continued to inspire new generations of agents who understood that true strength lies not in force, but in understanding, empathy, and the courage to do what's right.